You are hereby ordered for induction into the armed forces of the United States. The letter always came the same way, in a plain white envelope. For some, it was expected. For most, it was not. In the spring of 1967, Richard Doc Anderson, a 19-year-old from rural Ohio, opened his at the kitchen table. His mother was washing dishes. His father was silent, pretending to read the newspaper. The Selective Service number was printed in black ink, clear and final. "Well," he said quietly, "I guess I'm going to war." Anderson was a quiet kid. He'd volunteered as a medic's assistant in a local hospital, patching up minor cuts and broken bones. When the draft came, he told his mother, "At least I can help people." She cried that night, not because she didn't believe in America, but because she knew what Vietnam was becoming. By then, the headlines were everywhere. Que San, Hue, Con Thien, names most Americans couldn't pronounce, but every soldier feared. The war was no longer about ideals, it was about survival. When Anderson arrived in Da Nang, the air was thick, the smell of jet fuel mixing with humidity and rot. He was assigned to the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, the Fighting Fifth. His first letter home read, "Mom, the heat hits you like a wall. The jungle is alive. Every sound, every rustle makes you jump. The guys here are good, though. Most are my age. We laugh when we can. Sometimes we just sit and stare into the dark, hoping the night stays quiet." Doc's job was not to shoot, but to save. Yet in Vietnam, being a medic meant being the first to run toward danger. He treated wounds no textbook had ever described. Torn limbs, burns, shock. He stopped counting after a while. Back home in Michigan, another 19-year-old, Private Donald R. Burgett, was writing to his high school sweetheart before leaving for basic training. "They say we're fighting to stop communism," he wrote, "but I think we're just fighting not to die." Burgett was assigned to Company D 1st Marines and shipped out to Quang Tri Province, one of the most dangerous sectors of South Vietnam. The moment he landed, he realized the war wasn't what the recruiters promised. There were no front lines, there was no glory, just jungle, endless, wet, green, and full of ghosts. He wrote in his small mud-stained notebook, "The rain never stops. The bugs crawl into your clothes. We sleep with rifles in our arms like babies. I miss the sound of silence." By 1968, America had over 500,000 troops in Vietnam. Many of them were teenagers. They grew up fast. They learned that the jungle wasn't the enemy. It was the judge, jury, and executioner. It decided who went home and who didn't. Richard Anderson patched up his friends every day. He wrote less and less because there were fewer and fewer to write about. One night, after a long firefight near Hill 55, he wrote his final letter. "Mom, if I don't come home, tell Dad I did my best. Tell him I wasn't scared. Not really, just tired." He was killed 3 days later while treating a wounded Marine. He was 19 years old. The letter arrived home before the telegram. Across the ocean in Kansas, Private James Blaney was preparing to ship out. He had heard about boys like Anderson and Burgett, but he didn't believe he'd end up the same way. "I'm tougher than that," he'd told his sister. But Vietnam didn't care who was tough. He wrote from Khe Sanh, "The ground shakes every night from the bombing. Sometimes we can't tell if it's thunder or artillery. I dream of the cornfields back home, no sound but the wind." Blaney's platoon vanished during an ambush in early 1968. His remains were never recovered. His mother kept writing letters until the Army told her to stop. And so the lost boys began to disappear one by one. Their names turned into numbers, their faces into files. To the world, they were statistics, but to their families, they were still children, frozen in time, smiling in faded photographs. The jungle that ate boys alive. Vietnam wasn't just a battlefield. It was a living thing. The jungle breathed. It whispered. It hid. It was a green ocean, and inside it, the young soldiers of America were drowning, one heartbeat at a time. In early 1968, Private Donald R. Burgett and his platoon were sent into the A Shau Valley, one of the most infamous death zones in all of Vietnam. The valley stretched along the Laotian border, wrapped in mist and the constant hum of unseen movement. The Viet Cong knew it like their own veins. To the Americans, it was a labyrinth of death. Burgett wrote home 2 days before the mission. Mom, the jungle here doesn't feel real. You can't see 10 feet ahead. The ground moves under you. Every tree looks like it's watching you. He never wrote again. On the morning of February 21st, his squad was ambushed. A spray of gunfire tore through the fog, followed by explosions that ripped the silence apart. The radio screamed, the jungle echoed, then went quiet. When search teams arrived later, all they found were burned packs and footprints swallowed by mud. The jungle had taken them. Burgett was officially declared missing in action. His mother received a letter from the Army 2 months later. It began with the words no parent ever forgets. We regret to inform you. Meanwhile, farther north, the Battle of Hue was turning the ancient city into rubble. Thousands of civilians, South Vietnamese soldiers, and U.S. Marines were caught in the chaos. Among them was PFC, Richard Doc Anderson's old unit, the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. They fought house by house, street by street, often unsure who the enemy was. A Marine from that same unit later said in a taped interview, "You could smell the bodies before you saw them. You'd move into a house, there'd be a family hiding in the corner, terrified of both sides. That's when you stopped thinking about victory. You just wanted to survive." In the middle of all this, 19-year-old Corporal Thomas Blake, a real Marine whose letters were preserved by his sister, wrote this to his girlfriend. "We cleared a schoolhouse today. There were little shoes everywhere. I keep thinking about my brother's graduation last summer. It feels like that was a lifetime ago. He was killed the next morning when a sniper bullet hit him in the neck. He died instantly." Farther south, at Khe Sanh, another young man named Private First Class James Blaney was living through hell. The siege had begun, 7 to 7 days of non-stop shelling, airstrikes, and fear. "The ground shakes every hour," he wrote. "We can't sleep. We can't move. The air smells like metal and smoke. I used to think I was brave. Now I just want to go home." Blaney's friend, Sergeant Bill Emerson, later recalled in an oral history, "We were just kids, man. We didn't even shave yet. You'd wake up and the guy next to you would be gone, hit by shrapnel or sniper fire. And then you'd eat breakfast like nothing happened, because what else could you do?" By March 1968, the Marines at Khe Sanh had repelled wave after wave of attacks. When they were finally ordered to evacuate, Blaney's name was not on the manifest. He was gone. His body was never found. His parents kept a candle burning in their window for 6 years. The soldiers began calling it the jungle that eats boys alive, because it did. If the bullets didn't kill you, the heat, the disease, the silence might. Private Carl Stevens, another Marine stationed near Quang Tri, wrote, "We don't count days anymore. We count who's left." It wasn't about glory anymore. It wasn't even about the war. It was about staying human in a place that tried to strip that away. By the end of 1968, the United States had lost more than 16,000 men in that single year, the deadliest of the war. Most were under 21. Some never fired a single shot. Some died carrying their friends. Others simply vanished, swallowed by the mud. At home, the news came on every night. Black and white footage of soldiers crawling through rice paddies, villages on fire, helicopters landing in smoke. To most Americans, it was just background noise. But to the mothers, the fathers, the girlfriends, it was personal. Every silhouette could be their boy. And somewhere, deep in the Vietnamese jungle, thousands of dog tags glinted faintly under the soil, catching the sun for just a second before vanishing back into the dirt. Each one a story unfinished, each one a boy who never got to grow old. The jungle never gave them back, a veteran once said. It just kept their voices. The jungle takes them. The days in Vietnam bled together. The rain never stopped, the leeches never left, and the jungle always whispered. For the young Americans who were supposed to spend those years at college, every day in that green inferno was a slow drift away from who they used to be. Private First Class James Wright from Alabama had written home every single day. His letters were filled with dreams of opening a garage with his brother when he got back. But on July 9, 1967, during Operation Buffalo near Con Thien, his platoon was ambushed by North Vietnamese forces. Wright's best friend, Mike, found his body 2 days later, the last words he'd ever written still folded in his pocket. "Tell Mom not to worry, I'm just doing my job." Meanwhile, Corporal Larry Goss, only 19, fought to keep his sanity in the unending fog of war. He kept a diary, not about combat, but about his little sister's birthday, his dad's fishing trips, and the sound of cicadas back home. "If I die here," he wrote one night, "don't remember the war. Remember the boy who wanted to live." Larry was killed during a nighttime patrol in Quang Tri. His diary made it home. He didn't. Then there was Private Carl Johnson, a quiet kid from Minnesota who barely spoke. The squad used to joke that he'd talk more to the jungle than to them. But when the mortar shells started falling, Carl was the one dragging the wounded back to safety. He earned a Silver Star posthumously. His mother received it on a cold December morning, clutching the medal as if it might still be warm from her son's hand. By the end of 1968, more than 58,000 young Americans would die in a war half the country no longer understood. Most were under 21, boys who had never voted, never seen the world, never truly lived. The jungle took them, not just their bodies, but their laughter, their hope, and their future. Letters that came home. When the fighting stopped, the silence was deafening. Thousands of letters, written by trembling hands, sealed with hope, began arriving at homes across America. But this time, the writers were already gone. In Ohio, Mrs. Wright stood on her porch as the postman handed her a small envelope. Her son's handwriting danced across the front. Inside, his final words read, "I'm counting the days, Mom, I'll be home soon." She pressed the letter to her chest, whispering, "You already are." But the truth was cruel. James would never walk through that door again. In Minnesota, the Johnson family received Carl's diary. His younger sister opened it and read aloud, "When it rains here, I pretend it's the sound of home." The family didn't cry that night, not because they weren't broken, but because there were no tears left. Across the country, Larry Goss's father, a Korean War veteran, held his son's helmet at a local memorial service. Reporters asked if he thought the sacrifice was worth it. His eyes stayed on the flag. "I used to think war made men out of boys," he said softly. "Now I know it just takes them away." The war was ending, but the echoes didn't fade. In American kitchens, in small-town diners, in empty bedrooms, the ghosts of Vietnam lived on in ink and paper. Those letters, some stained with blood, some never opened, told a story the official reports never would. A story of boys who believed they were saving the world and of families who paid the price of that belief. As protests grew louder in the streets, students chanting, "Bring them home." Many held those letters high, reading them aloud like sacred texts. Each word became a heartbeat of the lost. Each name carved on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. became a reminder that every casualty number was once a dream, a smile, a son. By the mid-1970s, America was split in two. Those who believed in the cause and those who couldn't forgive it. But somewhere in between stood the memory of these young men, not as symbols, but as souls who wanted to live, love, and simply go home. The forgotten echo, legacy of the lost boys. By the time the last helicopter lifted off from Saigon in April 1975, the war was over. But for many Americans, it never truly ended. The echoes of those lost boys lingered in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Back home, their names became etched not just on black granite, but on the hearts of those who had loved them. Mothers who still sat an empty place at the dinner table. Fathers who stood in silence every Memorial Day, staring into the distance. Brothers and sisters who grew old while the boys they remembered never did. In small towns across America, boxes of letters and faded photographs became the only proof that those young men ever lived. Each envelope carried the same message. We believed we'd come home. But home was something they never reached. Sergeant Thomas Tom Colburn, who survived Khe Sanh, once said in a 1982 interview, "The hardest part isn't what I saw there. It's what I didn't get to tell them, that they mattered, that their stories should be told." And they were. Their words, those fragile lines written on damp paper, found new life decades later. They were read aloud at veterans' gatherings, printed in newspapers, and taught in classrooms. The voices of 18-year-olds who once trembled under jungle rain now spoke to generations who would never know war. At the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, people still leave things behind. A baseball glove, a wedding ring, a half-finished pack of cigarettes. Once, someone left a letter addressed simply to "My best friend Jimmy." It read, "You said we'd both come home. I did, but I left the best of me with you." And maybe that's the truest story of all. Not the politics, not the strategies, not even the battles, but the quiet truth that war takes what can never be returned. Youth, innocence, and the promise of tomorrow. Today, those lost boys live on, not in uniform, but in memory. In every tear shed by a veteran who made it home. In every flag that waves on a lonely grave, and in every heart that still whispers their names. They were boys once, dreamers, sons, and though the war stole their tomorrows, it could never silence their story.